Well, turning to our next guest, Conrad DeQuadros. He says he's pretty upbeat on the economy these days, particularly following Friday's unemployment report. They are finding reasons to see that the labor market may actually be turning upward with conviction. Conrad joins us now with his upbeat expectations here. So tell me, so many people, Conrad, say you can't necessarily read too much into the numbers that we got now. You got to look at what we see in April. You got to look towards the spring when we stop seeing some of those census jobs sort of skew the figures that we're seeing on the employment front. Tell me why you're seeing some conviction here that you do think labor's on the upswing.
Well, I think it's very difficult to quantify, but I think if you look at the household survey, there is a strong indication there that employment in February was hampered by the winter storms that hit during the survey week for establishment payrolls. So I think there probably was a significant impact there. I think that the storms may have masked an increase in employment in February. I think outside of the storms, we probably would have had an increase. So you're probably going to get a bounce back in employment because of the storms in March when that report comes out in early April. And then on top of that, of course, you have the census workers as well. The government breaks out the census workers, though, so we will have a clear reading on underlying trends in employment.
So when are we going to get that, you said?
I think that we'll see a fairly healthy increase in, even outside of census workers, and census workers could add as much as 150,000 to employment in March. And I think even outside of census workers, you probably get a decent increase in payrolls as well. And that's based on a lot of the other economic releases that we had for the month of February.
How key are the census workers to the economy? Because, everyone says you've got to look past them. Obviously, it's only temporary. By the end of the year, those that get jobs will already have lost them. But does it actually help us? Because obviously they're making money. They can go out there and spend it.
I don't think it's a huge factor because I think in total, the increase in census workers, as you said, it's very short term. You're going to have the peak in census workers in May. If you look back at the 1990 and 2000 census, and then census workers start to drop off the rolls pretty soon after that. So I don't think that it's that significant given how short of a time frame it is and given the number of workers are going to be employed relative to the size of the labor market. I think much more important will be if there's a sustainable updraft in underlying employment.
Do we see then unemployment? I mean, do you think it's peaked in October at 10.1%, or do we see it come back as more people see better numbers in the non-farm payrolls survey and think I can get back in the job market now and look for a job?
I was actually surprised with the unemployment reading. I thought that the reading that we had for January, that 0.3% decline, was just a statistical aberration because the survey can be very volatile. But we've held down to that lower reading for February, and usually there's not a lot of weather impact on unemployment. So I think we have, in fact, seen the peak in unemployment. It's obviously still very elevated, and the labor market is still impaired. But I think that we've seen the peak in the unemployment rate, and we'll see a very modest decline in unemployment through 2010.
So if we've seen the peak, Conrad, what's the new normal for unemployment? I mean, will we get back to that 5.6% unemployment level, or is the new normal greater than that?
Well, I think that it is higher than the levels that we were looking at below. I mean, I don't necessarily believe in the sort of Nehru concept of unemployment, but the Fed still seems to be, given Bernanke's last testimony, seems to be looking at a 5% unemployment rate as Nehru. I think that is probably higher than that, given the trends that we've seen in unemployment. I think that 6% is probably the rate that we'll get to, but it's going to take a long time to get there.
Does the Fed, though, still feel comfortable, you think, raising rates when we're looking at 9%, 8% unemployment?
I don't think so. I think the Fed, despite my view that the recovery that we're in right now is sustainable, we probably see 3.5% growth, and we start seeing payroll growth it may be as soon as the next employment report. I still think that the Fed's going to be on hold. As you said, the unemployment rate's still very elevated. Their views on the inflation process with the unemployment rate remaining high, they're not going to be concerned about accommodative monetary policy, and I think that they'll be on hold until early 2011.
Conrad, you're sounding cautious to me. You're not sounding overly optimistic, though.
Well, I think the issue is that we've had an extremely deep recession, and we're coming out of this recession, and I think that growth is going to be, we're going to see some decent growth. And in certain sectors of the economy, like manufacturing, it's going to be quite robust. But the problem is we have built up such a high degree of slack in the economy, and not relating that back to inflation, but I think in terms of the level of the unemployment rate still being very high, we need to see very robust growth for a long period of time to get the unemployment rate down. So that's still a big factor and a big problem for the economy.